Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon, and thank you, church. Thank you all for sharing this teaching with us, the members of the Great Positive Action Ministry. Today, I am your host and humble teacher of Isaiah chapter 32. Okay, the kingdom of righteousness. Always be ready, baby. Before we get into our chapter 32, I want us to do a small recap since it has been a little while since we looked into Isaiah's, the book of Isaiah, all right, into our rotation. So in chapters 30 and 31, we learned that they are just two warnings or woes to the people of Israel. One of them is a warning against to those who rely on Egypt and those, the name actually is the obscene nation or the rebellious nations. So we learned between those two chapters, we did them together. They feed off each other a lot. We learned that there is a high level of a rebellious attitude towards the actual teachings of the world. This is something that is almost cyclical throughout the book of Isaiah, where the people of Israel go through different cycles where they fall into almost falling out of grace of God, and then they go back to it. This is one of those rebellious periods when we actually receive these two prophecies in 30 and 31. They look down onto Egypt, and we learn and discussed as a group that they not only went there physically, but it was almost like a spiritually, they were almost like relying on the guidance of what the people of Egypt had to offer, departing from the teachings of God, because we know that there is a high level of idolatry in the people of Egypt at the time. There is a high level of refusal of the word of God. Actually, we learned in Isaiah 31, actually in both Isaiah 30 and 31, we learned that the leaders of the church or the synagogue actually tell them, listen, don't give us more prophecies about bad stuff. Tell us about good stuff. Actually, stop saying so many warnings and so forth, so on. So there's a refusal of the word of God directly by actually refusing the prophecies that Isaiah are offering. However, there's a restoration period that we learned towards the end of chapter 30 and a little bit in chapter 31, where God still shows his mercies and shows his grace to his people. For the people of Israel are the people that are promised through the promise of Abraham. This is actually great evidence that actually continues to be alive at this time. There is a destruction of the enemies, where actually we almost explore like it was another chance that the people of Israel were given. The Assyrians were actually in control, in captivity of the lands of Israel at this time. They at the end of 31, we learned that the main important message is not to align with sinners, in particular with idolaters. At this time, when we actually say that they were relying on Egypt, this is what we actually learned, that they were actually aligning a lot with sinners through the form of idolatry of the people of Egypt. Okay. I see my Uncle Rene might have a question. Are you okay? Is this refreshing your memory? Just okay, he's muted. No problem. All right.
He said he's good.
Okay, cool. So in Isaiah chapter 32, I'm going to divide it into three parts, and the main actual themes, or let's say points of this chapter 32, is that there is a reign of righteousness, and this actually is presented to us from verses 1 through 8. The second portion of it, or the middle portion of the chapter 9 to 14, is the rejection of Israel, and the rejection of Israel, and it is actually presented in the middle of the chapter. And towards the end of the chapter, following in a similar theme from the other chapters of Isaiah, there's a level of restoration towards the people of Israel. However, this one is a little bit different because we're going to discuss how this involves us, and it's not just a prophecy for the people of Israel of the time like the other chapters have. Okay, so when we talked about the reign of righteousness, we learned that the beginning of the chapter is speaking about a specific king. Who is the king that is being spoken of? And I should have put capital K on that one. Who is the king? Did anybody read the chapter? Okay, dear Ralph, tell me, this is our open interpretation. There's not a name that is given. Who's the king?
According to some historical data, they think that they talk about the king that they talk about that will reign in righteousness is Jesus.
Is Jesus, correct. All right, very good, very good. And I'm glad that he actually mentions it directly there. Now, let me tell you, for the Hebrews, this actually remember that this is yet to pass. This is yet to pass. And this we align with us Christians, and Hebrews actually do align in the sense that this is, the difference is that this is for them is going to be about the coming of Christ, who hasn't come in here. The Messiah has not come, but for us it's going to be about the second coming of the Messiah. All right, so for us, the one point of department in here is that this is speaking about the second coming of Christ. How do we know that this prophecy is about the second coming specifically? Any text jumped at you that actually gave you the hint beyond the speaking of the king at the beginning of the chapter? Any scripture actually came up? Go ahead, dear Ralph.
Yeah, because it mentioned that he's gonna be a good king for the people. They're gonna redeem the people. You know, that all that suffering they've been going through and all the deviation that they have done, you know, moving away from God, they're gonna be reestablished, and that's why they
Very good.
Jesus.
The point of restoration, that is the key right there. Many historians are actually able to study, and they come to the conclusion that the key point in here is that restoration, that is actually the main message that we know. It's about the second coming. Theo Ralph, I want to ask Theo Rene, because he had his hand up real quick, if he had anything else to add. Go ahead.
No, I thought you thinking which scripture in the New Testament give you Jesus say about what is going to happen over here. But I was thinking about that scripture that says that I'm going to my Father in heaven. There is many mansion. I'm gonna build a mansion to you. I was thinking about that. So
okay. All right, thank you. I was trying to keep it directly to the text within this chapter, but I am glad that you're able to reference it to the New Testament, as we know that the scripture verifies and confirms itself. Thank you, dear Rene. In verse 3, I want to make sure that you had something else to add, dear Rene?
Just want to say, believe it or not, is the religion of Islam. Jesus went to heaven, and Jesus is the one that will come back according to the Holy Quran. I just wanted to say that. So in the Quran, he's coming back to, even though he went to heaven alive, they say, okay, that's it.
Yeah. The one thing is that they denounce the whole point of the resurrection and the fact that he is just a prophet, not a son of God. But thank you, minor details, I guess, right? But anyways, in verse 3, going back to this chapter, we actually learn that he actually says the eyes of those who see will no longer be closed. Okay, the eyes of those who see will no longer be closed. This is the part of for historians that actually tells them that he's speaking about us believers that have been baptized under Christ, because we are walking in knowledge, or should be walking in knowledge of the grace of God, and our eyes, even though we see, will no longer be closed, because right now in the world that we live in, it is believed that there's a cloth over our heads, oftentimes, just like our eyes are closed. So that is one of the other scriptures that actually jumps to you, that lets you know it's about the second coming. In verse 8, okay, moving along in here. it speaks about the nobles. It actually says in verse 8 directly, to be more specific, it says, but the noble make noble plans, and by noble deeds they stand. What do you think that that is telling us there, Tio Rene? Actually, you know what? Let me go to Brandon. Sorry, Tio Rene, just because I want to have everybody.
I'm not fully confident on this one because the verse before, I'm pretty sure it says scoundrels or something like that. Or like bad people, I guess. So
Yeah, the wicked, when it talks about the wicked methods and schemes and stuff like that, and the destruction of the poor. But you know, the one separation that it says, that verse 8 starts, it says, but the noble make noble plans. You understand what I mean?
and then they will stand or something along those lines. So I
Yeah.
imagine it's saying the righteous will be rewarded for their righteous deeds.
Okay,
I think that's what it means.
that's one way of
Will be
putting it.
stand.
Okay, Tio Rene?
No, I mean, the word noble is, what he's saying is, the one that the righteous heart will have, will do righteous deeds. I mean, the true believer will act according to God and will do the right thing, and therefore will be seen.
Yeah,
That's-
it will continue. That's correct. It's talking about definitely the noble deeds. If you go to the New Testament, you understand that in the book of Luke, for example, Jesus speaks to everybody and says, listen, you got to do this to each other. You understand what I mean? You got to be, the gospel is always experienced through the person that is next to us. So these are the noble deeds that he's actually talking about. So we are the noble that actually are called to do noble deeds. All right. In verse 9 to 14, there's a focus on women. Why is this? Now, Hannah, I know that you said that you raised your hand, that you read the chapter. I know that probably jumped at you like it jumped at me, that they mentioned about women in there. What do you think there's a focus in women?
I'm not exactly sure, but I think there's a big difference when it comes to talking about men versus women. I think they're just trying to make it, I guess, like, I don't really know, to be honest.
Okay, all right, Brandon.
I'll give it a shot. To me, it sounds like more like it starts off like women, you think you're secure or something along those lines. So I don't know if it's like nobody will be spared, nobody, even the decision makers, I guess, which would be men or the women, won't, they will be rewarded or punished justly or correctly. That's my guess on it, but
Okay. Very good. So it's interesting. This is what I've learned. I came across a couple of different learnings on when it comes to this. Okay, there's some that actually have taken the more structural approach of talking to women and the role that women are called to play, especially when he talks about daughters. In throughout there in those verses 9 through 15, it tells you about. It says, well, at the beginning, it says, "You women who are complacent, raise up and listen to me. You daughters who feel secure, hear what I have to say." He's talking about the different roles that women are to take as far as, let's say, giving substance to the family, meaning feeding. If you take the physical sense of things, women are called to feed good things to their offspring so that way they can raise up strong and healthy. So there's one school of believers that actually of scholars that actually looks at that, but there's another school that actually looks at the church. And throughout the New Testament and in the Old Testament, the church and even synagogues and everything like that are compared to women. They actually use throughout the New Testament we actually have oh man, the scripture, Brandon, what you said today doesn't come to me, escapes my mind. The specific scriptures that actually Jesus says that the church is a bride. You know what I mean? He always refers to it as a woman. So there's a historian, a number of historians that believe that in here they're talking about the church. Okay. And he says you women because he acknowledges that there's different tribes still within the people of Judah. You know what I mean? The different tribes of Israel and so far, so on. So there's a lot of different congregations. So there's a level of historians that believe that when he's talking about women in here, he's prophesying about the church itself. Okay, so that is one of the beliefs, which I found very interesting, because that I think is something that sounded very logical to me. Moving on to verses 15 to 20, verses 15 to 20, we see that I'm sorry. Something had stayed me when I was still thinking about the people of the church. Okay. In verses 15 to 20, it says that the Spirit of God is going to dwell, let's say, in the wilderness, and his righteousness is going to live in righteousness is going to live in further land. Who are the people that are spoken of in there? I think that is very self-explanatory, but who do you think are the people that are spoken of in there? Go ahead, dear Ralph.
I think we talk about the people that saw in the sea, because in verse 20 said that you will be blessed if you sow the seed in every street, and then you let talk about some animal, the let them free, and let them feed freely, that's what they're talking about.
Those that are preaching, let's say, the gospel, that are helping to spread the word, those that are actually planting seeds and so forth on, are the ones. And I like that. That's correct, Ralph. At least that's what I understood out of it. Okay, and that is the closing of the chapter right there. I want to make sure that I am able to relate some of the learnings that I have in there to the lessons that I want us to take for today about the chapter. This is something that I'm trying to do when I'm looking at Isaiah, because there are a lot of advice that told me, like, listen, this is a very tough book to relate to on today's world, but I want to make sure that I highlight that there are different lessons that we can take. In this chapter, we can know that living in grace means living in righteousness, okay? Being righteous, that actually, the part that Theo Ralph just mentioned about the importance of spreading the word and actually doing the work of Jesus, accepting Jesus in his love and grace, in his life and grace. We know that its second coming is going to actually have us sitting there by his right, and I know that we are called to actually be in reigns in there for 1,000 years that he's going to have in here. All right, the millennium come, as the word says. He actually calls us to get our house in order, and this is something that I believe, for me at the very least, when I was reading this, I'm like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm always ready. The minister always speaks to us and tells us, like, listen, you know how I'm always telling you that I'm ready. If the Lord wants to take me right now, I'm ready to go, and so far, so on. And in several conversations with him, I have picked his mind, and he says it's because he has his house in order. He believes that all the other things are taken care of, to the point that if the Lord comes and takes him, he has his in order, he can go with confidence. Okay, so that's an important lesson there. If we are in temporary rejection, ask questions. This is what I mean by that. Sometimes we go through periods that we actually question, where's God's presence in my life? We do have those moments of question. I know that I have had many conversations with my uncle Rene. I hope that he's shaking his head, because I know that he can relate with that. We actually question, like, wait a second. You know what I mean? I'm trying my best. I'm doing all of these things and everything like that. So like the people of Israel that keep receiving all these warnings from Isaiah 31, 30, 32, and so far, so on. It's like, okay, I know that they question, wait, is God with us? Is God for us? Is God for us? So sometimes we got to make sure that we ask questions. We ask the right question, and we ask God the questions. Always remember, the truth will hurt. Okay? The people of Israel, from chapters 1, 30, 31, and 32, reject the truth because it's painful to them. Don't align with sinners. You're seeking the things of the world, and so forth, so on. So the truth will hurt. I think that's another one that I know that I have, when I have had my heart to, let's say, with your Ralph, and we always explore about the things of our past and our moms and stuff like that. Well, funny, because my mom is his sister, but when we always speak about the things of our childhood, they're painful things, and the truths are it's just painful. It helps us grow, but it's very painful. And this is something that I believe I get when I'm reading these chapters of Isaiah. always know you can be restored. In every one of these chapters, this 30, 31, 32, it always ends up giving you a message of hope. Know that restoration is coming. Know that the truth is going to hurt you. Know that you're walking through a desert. So far, so destruction is going to be upon it. But know that restoration is coming. You will always be restored by the grace and glory of God. Only Jesus can restore us. He is the way, the light, and the truth. And I know that we all know that in here. Okay. And the blessings are always the main fruit that we actually are able to reap when we do His holy word. Thank you. You guys have any questions, comments, or concerns? Muted? No? Okay, cool. Diana?